Camouflage and combat uniforms are synonymous with the armed forces and pretty much have been since their inception. However, over the last few decades, both have really spread out into the commercial and fashion markets. Whether it be for casual or workwear and collecting, to fully developed designer garments, many pieces have either been directly used, repurposed, or emulated. But there is another aspect to it, that of parody and, for a lack of a better term, meme garments, be they uniforms, ensembles, or camouflage. Often birthed from a joke or an image online and spread through social media, forums, apps, and whatever else, military surplus and tactical gear has seen varying levels of humorous and joke pieces, some of which are small and short-lived, and others which can grow and eventually spawn a completely new thing. Now, most jokes, internet fads, and memes usually have shelf lives, and once they hit the mainstream will often teeter out, rarely returning to their peak levels, and more often than not continue on ironically or through smaller subgroups. However, sometimes they can evolve beyond what they originally were and stay relevant within a group or environment. The same can be said for the 4 topics we'll be looking at in this video, all of which started off as one thing, was picked up and altered, and eventually evolved into something much larger. So on that note, let's dive into the first topic, that of the tactical tracksuit. One could argue that a tactical tracksuit is just a camouflaged one, or just a regular one with some sort of armed forces decal or emblem, which is then frequently coupled with tactical gear like vests, helmets, chest rigs, and so on. Technically, that would be true. However, over the last few years, they have slowly become more popular, be it in their original military issue form, commercial fashion pieces, or even something in between. This can be seen if you search camouflage tracksuit or even military tracksuit, as a number of items will appear. With many older patterns slowly seeping into the catalog of various clothing brands, coupled with the rise in old and dead stock PT, exercise, and workout uniforms of various armed forces becoming available to buy, it was really only a matter of time until they began being mixed with tactical gear and other pieces, giving the overall look. Now, technically there have been a few instances that predate this fad, be they in real life or in media. However, one of the most significant connections and sort of origins relates to a stereotype which involves them, the subculture known as gopniks. Found across Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and many of the other former Soviet republics and satellite countries, gopnik is considered something of a derogatory term to describe groups of delinquent, almost hooligan lower-class people who often live in apartment complexes throughout cities and semi-urban areas. Whether it be gopnik for men or gopnitsa for women, the term has a few purported origins, with 2 primary ones being gop being a sort of onomatopoeia word for going, hopping, or a quick, almost striking motion, which itself may have been an offshoot of the word gopat, which has a few meanings such as to hop, jump, or shout, with more slang meanings such as to rob, mug, or loiter. The other, and more widely believed one, is that the word is actually a play on an older acronym for specific housing structures that became popular in the Soviet Union after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. Known as a state dormitory of the proletariat, these early structures would eventually evolve into different series of much larger and sprawling apartment blocks, which continued to be used for the same primary purpose, the housing of the working and lower classes. In Russian, the term is Государственное объединение пролетариата, which has an acronym that looks like this, but is pronounced GOP, and spelled in English GOP. After that, nik is a Russian prefix added to many words to describe a thing or person associated or involved in something, which has also extended into English as well as other languages, being used in words such as beatnik and no goodnik, for example. But anyways, gopniks vary from region to region, but are often associated with and stereotyped in various forms, such as eating sunflower seeds and drinking large quantities of alcohol, being uneducated, enjoying certain types of music related to crime and hard bass, squatting, petty crimes, and most famously, wearing Adidas tracksuits. Naturally, because of this connection, a number of these tactical tracksuits and the associated getups you may see with them often draw from the gopnik connection. A perfect example of this is the online persona of King Artyom, frequently accompanied by the lumbering juggernaut, both of whom are usually decked out in uniforms and clothing bearing Russia's woodland EMR camouflage, along with numerous pieces of gear. The thing that makes Artyom stick out is the fact that he wears a tracksuit bearing tripoloski, or 3 stripes in English, along the sleeves and legs, the telltale sign of the Adidas brand. This mixed with his Russian-like accent immediately makes people think of the stereotype. In fact, the suit itself, which is made by Mordor Tech, is called the GopTac suit, short for Gopnik Tactical Suit. But what's the deal with Gopniks and Adidas tracksuits that in turn have led to the rise of this whole tactical tracksuit look? Well, there is a bit of an answer, but in order to tell it properly, we have to go a little bit back in time. During the Cold War, many everyday products and commodities that were seen throughout the United States and much of the West weren't really common throughout the USSR and Eastern Bloc. For the most part, these items were limited, at least until Gorbachev instituted policies such as perestroika and glasnost through the 1980s, which helped open up many facets of the Soviet Union. However, things still made their way in, and one of the most popular was clothing. Early instances of this often came in the form of gifts or small-scale sponsorships, usually revolving around athletes and sports, primarily through the East-West Germany connection. Being that German brands like Puma and Adidas were so close to the border between the East and West, many East Germans were able to attain items while the brands themselves increasingly got official contracts with many Eastern Bloc athletes, associations, and clubs of varying levels. However, the biggest instance of this was the Soviet team during the 1980 Olympics, which were hosted in Moscow. Clad often in red and white, various uniforms of the team were licensed by Adidas. In fact, this connection actually predated the games, as their products started to be seen throughout the 1970s, but when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979, the international condemnation was high and eventually trickled down to Adidas. As a way to get around this, logos and emblems were removed. However, in many cases, the three stripes remained. After the 1980 games, people all over the USSR wanted to get their hands on sneakers and tracksuits and various other sporting pieces, specifically Adidas, as they had seen them throughout the events and knew that they were of high quality, especially if they were obtained directly from Germany. It permeated so much that even varying types of tennis shoes and sneakers, most commonly Moskva, which bore a striking resemblance to Adidas models, made their way into the mountains of Afghanistan, often being worn by more elite and special forces units due to them being much quieter. So as the years progressed, items like these, specifically Adidas tracksuits in the brand colors black and white, bearing the three stripes, became something of a status symbol that were also worn frequently due to their light and comfortable fit. Eventually, these suits would become more common and as such were able to be picked up easier for a cheaper price, eventually reaching the masses, leading to their association with the Gopnik subculture. As far as the camouflage connections, designs have permeated more and more into various fashions, with brands often creating or even lifting older or more esoteric patterns to be printed onto their garments, and naturally tracksuits became one of them. Finally, in regards to the whole tactical angle, it has seen a rise over the last few years as different types of military surplus have hit the market, specifically exercise and physical training garments, which usually come in the form of tracksuits. Italian, German, Austrian, and Greek, among others, are just some examples of pieces which have become, at least for now, more common, and when advertised or showcased online, sometimes have models wearing things like balaclavas and chest rigs, often emulating or using this Gopnik Soviet connection, as well as some instances of Irish Republican Army members from the 1990s. And on top of the camouflage pieces such as the aforementioned Goptak suit, there have been a few custom and altered ones out there, such as East German ones, which were influenced by styles and colors, with perhaps one of the most famous examples coming out of the 2001 movie Behind Enemy Lines. Worn by arguably the movie's most memorable antagonist, Sasha, as he pursues the main character, it too emulates the Adidas look, as it features the iconic white stripes, granted 2 instead of 3, and also bears Sarajevo below an image similar to the logo for the 1984 Winter Olympic Games, which were held there. Again, the overall look and appeal fits the bill and time frame, and much like the style as a whole, this particular piece has been related to uniforms and tactical gear for years, and has even seen a few runs done where it was recreated or replicated, with the most recent one created by Commando Store in June of 2024, where they went so far as to have them made in Serbia to add an extra level of authenticity. Anyway though, let's now transition from one form of casual and comfy wear to another, that of the Aloha, also known as Hawaiian shirt. If you think about it, camouflage is essentially the means to conceal oneself into the surrounding terrain, be it arid, tropical, snowy, wet, dry, floral, or sparse. Because there's so many terrains out there, there are so many different takes on the concept, but what is usually agreed upon is that you want colors to match. In the case of vegetated terrain, that sometimes will see not only the shades and colors blending in, but also the use of shapes that are reminiscent of the surrounding flora. That being said, one could argue that certain garments and designs out there that aren't camouflage could be considered as such. Of these, perhaps the most obvious and famous would be Aloha shirts, more commonly known as Hawaiian shirts, which surprisingly have something of a long history with various armed forces, mostly that of the US military. The idea behind them started sometime around the 1920s or 30s, when stores which made and sold clothing and dry goods within the city of Honolulu began offering them. Though there is some debate as to who exactly began the process, overall what occurred was that these companies would begin using textiles boasting Japanese prints, fabric for Hawaiian quilts and tapa, that being bark cloth made with intricate designs produced throughout numerous Pacific islands, and finally floral designs into short-sleeve shirts. Though not not initially popular. As tourism ramped up, so too did sales and interest, and after the conclusion of the Second World War, many troops stationed around the Pacific Theater returned home with shirts, essentially spreading them around the world. As the 1950s and 60s came on, they would be seen more and more in movies and being worn by celebrities, sometimes here and there, and other times becoming a staple of a look, such as the television show Magnum P.I. On the consumer front, in 1962, the idea of Aloha Friday was pushed, lobbying for the idea of men in many workplaces being allowed to wear these shirts during the summer and warmer months. This would slowly gain in popularity, making its way into California and then the world, where it would eventually morph into what is now known as Casual Friday. So naturally, the concept of lightweight, breathable button-up or down shirts, be they short or long sleeve, boasting intricate, often floral-based designs, made its way into many areas of the world, and of course, it too would be sometimes seen being worn by troops, as they in a way helped to originally spread them. In fact, back in 2007, the U.S. Air Force's Pacific Command had a specially made shirt unveiled in Hawaii to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the branch. But apart from unique pieces as well as sporadic uses seen in various military installations and theaters related to the War on Terror, the Hawaiian and Casual Friday connection seemed to have caught on in a big way, with many special forces often being seen worn before, in between, or after missions. Paired with proper uniform pieces, gear, and components, it wasn't long until the style and overall look would become replicated and run with. But this is where it sort of diverges into two different paths. The first being a more straightforward one, seeing people replicating the look for the purposes of milsim, airsoft collecting, LARPing, or just fun and style, which in turn led to a number of companies beginning to produce shirts of not only standard designs, but also ones that incorporated more tactical, military, and firearm-related shapes, colors, and so on, with even traditional camouflage being thrown into the mix. The second, and one that seems to be more widely known by the general public, is something of a controversial one, which has left a bit of a negative air around the look of Hawaiian shirts mixed with military and tactical gear. That shift? The Boogaloo movement. Spawned out of internet memes related to a few things such as anti-government sentiment, the belief of the coming of a second civil war or another revolution, the group began to coalesce in the real world around 2019 and 2020. Brought on in part due to the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent lockdowns, as well as the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protests which spread across the United States, the members and those associated with them began to appear at various events, functions, protests, and locations. Labeled as an extremist movement, militia, and anti-government entity, the group itself is a loose connection of people who hold a wide variety of beliefs related to anti-government sentiments, pro-gun rights, both pro- and anti-Black Lives Matter opinions, pro-white supremacy, pro-anarchy, and anti-lockdown, among others. This, granted often being debated and contested, has led many to place the group's members all over the political spectrum. What is known, though, is a few instances of violence and crime have been connected to individuals that associated with the group, or at least seem to sympathize and or utilize phrases and imagery associated with them, most notably the use of boog, or boogaloo, as well as Hawaiian shirts. So why exactly use these shirts? Well, apart from the established pairing of them with tactical gear, as mentioned earlier, it actually harkens back to the word boogaloo. In 1984, the film Breakin' released, which was generally a musical dance-centric piece, with the plot surrounding tensions and disagreements within a troupe around different forms of dancing, while also defeating rival dance groups and trying to win a competition. By the end, they achieved this while also hinting at a new dance, the Electric Boogaloo. Skip forward a few months and a sequel, Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, was released. Again a musical dance movie, it's centered on many of the main characters trying to stop a community center from being destroyed to make way for a new mall. Both movies, though looked at with mixed views, were generally considered fun by the public. However, the subtitle of the second, Electric Boogaloo, became something of a joke at that time, as well as years later, on the internet, as it would frequently be used to make fun of the idea of sequels, copies, or clones of things, more so if they appeared much lower in quality, were lazier, or just generally worse than the original. This kind of ironic, poking fun at sort of humor would spread, and soon it would be adopted by the movement, as they saw an impending second civil war or revolution. From there, boogaloo would sometimes be shortened to boog, or other words and phrases that twisted it, with one of the more popular being igloo, but also luau, as a way to get around potentially having phrases, pictures, videos, or posts on social media being flagged or deleted. This in turn led to igloos becoming something of a symbol of the movement, while Hawaiian shirts started to be worn by a few to coincide with luau, being a traditional Hawaiian party consisting of large amounts of food and entertainment. And so it wasn't long until both of these would spread all over, being seen at numerous numerous events, with them even being turned into something of a flag to represent the movement as a whole. Naturally, due to the more radical elements and members, the association of pairing Hawaiian shirts with tactical gear and uniform pieces, though also to an extent just wearing Hawaiian shirts, started being shared through news outlets, social media, and just word of mouth, resulting in them gaining a level of notoriety. Though the group isn't as prevalent as it once was, on occasion it still pops up, though many now try to distance the shirt and its pairing with the group and its various ideologies and beliefs. This obviously comes in the form of just wearing and pairing them, but also in that traditional designs are now being seen on other tactical items such as helmet covers, hats, and so on, essentially creating a new overall look and feel to the ensemble. But with that, let's move on to another camouflage, or rather theme of camouflages, which actually in a way spawned out of these Aloha shirts, that of the Miami camouflage and subsequent wave-related patterns. With Hawaiian shirts often bearing unique, almost camouflage designs, it wouldn't come as a surprise that the concept of actually putting camouflage patterns onto them would happen, and for a while now a host of created and look-alike designs have been seen, as well as actually issued ones. But out of all that came a sort of unique series of modified historic designs, which since the mid to late 2010s have only increased in popularity and scale, that of Miami camouflage. Seemingly appearing sometime between 2015 to 2017, a few items began being sold in what is now known as Miami Tigerstripe, which has seen a few iterations of the traditional temperate-based design incorporate various shades of neon blues, purples, and pinks to supplement the already seen black and white colors. This concept of recoloring would then spread to other existing patterns, sometimes under the label of synth or new wave, with adjacent similar shades in more pastel colors appearing too under names such as vaporwave. So what do all these neon and pastel colors, along with Miami and the various waves, have in common that they're all being covered together? Well, primarily the 1980s and the city and the state of Florida circa that time. Confused? Don't worry, let's break it down. For a while now, there have been a series of subgenres of electronic music, often leaning heavily into the use of the synthesizer. Many often see accompanying visual art styles, or more specifically, aesthetics. Though there are quite a few names for them, along with a spiderweb of genres, subgenres, microgenres, and other derivatives, for our purposes we really have to primarily look at the visuals of Outrun, which is frequently paired with synthwave, though sometimes also called new or retrowave, and vaporwave, which is used to both describe audio and visual elements. Though the two have their own unique takes and elements, both share some overlap when it comes to audio and general visuals, with the two primary ones being, as mentioned, the 1980s, predominantly colors, music, and technology, and the city of Miami. Apart from standalone pieces, the sounds and sights of synthwave and Outrun have been appearing in a number of mediums over the years, specifically movies, television shows, and video games. If you want to be technical, being that components of them have been around since the 1980s, there's plenty of examples. However, being that the style overall didn't have a name, they would be retroactively classified as such. Since their formal inception as dedicated forms of art, many more recent forms of media have used them. Not always cut and dry and sometimes mixed with other aesthetics, elements can be seen and or heard in productions big and small, such as 2015's Kung Fury being on the lesser known, though more obvious side, to 2018's Mandy, and even more mainstream pieces such as Stranger Things. A perfect example that more or less checks almost every box are large chunks of Ryan Gosling's filmography, Blade Runner 2049, Only God Forgives, and most notably Drive. However, it seems that there was one specific post-2000 form of media which played a massive role in their creation, the 2002 video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Taking place in a fictionalized, though very much based on the real-world Miami circa 1986, the game's heavily stylized rendition introduced a whole new generation of people to the sights and sounds, which would eventually help to create the aforementioned aesthetic and artistic genres. But technically it didn't start there, as developers of the game have stated that older forms of media were their inspiration, the primary ones being the 1983 film Scarface and the television show Miami Vice. Both of these were predominantly set in Miami and essentially laid the groundwork for the game, which in turn laid the groundwork for Outrun and its accompanying synthwave, not to mention vaporwave as well. But where did these pieces get the idea for the colors, graphics, and sound? Well, that's twofold in a way, but also two more steps deeper. The first is actually the city of Miami itself. Once a bustling destination visited and stayed at by many from the 1930s through the 1960s, by the beginning of the 80s, Miami was rife with empty and rundown buildings, vacant storefronts, and crime related to drugs and affiliated cartels and groups. It wasn't long, though, until a new life began to be breathed into the historic South Beach area, seeing new businesses move in, which led to many of the crumbling structures being renovated and restored. often with fresh coats of pastel paints supplemented by neon lights and signs advertising newly opened bars, nightclubs, and places to just hang out. As these opened, people began to come back, and though the city grew in popularity, so too did crime, granted more frequently the organized kind, which in turn brought on fictionalized depictions coming in the form of movies and television. Additionally, the vibrant colors seen on both buildings and clothing worn by residents and visitors alike also followed, being seen in Scarface, though more prevalently in Miami Vice. In fact, early seasons of the show leaned more into pastel colors, while later ones more into neon. With these being seen by millions, the aesthetic spread throughout the United States and areas beyond. But if you look at these music and art styles, you'll get a sense of the city, but also that of the 1980s in general. And though Miami did help inspiration-wise, there was another source which in a way helped define the entire decade. If you think about it, most decades from the mid-1900s through today have a sort of stereotypical overall look or style. These are usually generalized amalgamations pulling from a variety of sources, and if you break the 80s down, you can see a lot of prime examples. Paintings and traditional art, one may think of Patrick Nagel and pop minimalism. Fashion had voluminous hairstyles coupled with garments composed of bright or flashy colors which clashed with materials, styles, and shapes. Technology, which saw major jumps in personal devices and commercial consumerism, such as personal computers, home gaming consoles, and mobile phones made by companies like Atari, IBM, and Motorola. And music, which, though vast in genre, saw a massive rise in pop, which leaned heavily into electronic-based sounds and instruments, from Hall & Oates and Tears for Fears to more direct synth sounds like Giorgio Moroder, Mark Mothersbaugh, and John Carpenter. But when it comes to colors and visuals overall, which in a way inspired and influenced a lot of the just mentioned, all one has to look to is one design group by the name of Memphis. Based out of Milan, Italy, this international group founded in 1981 was born out of the radicalism movement, a sort of counter to modernism, and was most known for the creation of a wide array of pieces which immediately drew one's attention to use of bright primary colors, a mesh of alternating designs, and strange shapes to make everyday items such as lamps, chairs, desks, tables, and so on. Quick to catch the eye of crowds at the 1981 Milan Design Fair, which, as reported by a New York Times article, appalled some and amused others, but put everyone attending the fair in a state of high excitement. Over the next 6 years, the group would continue to produce unique pieces that in turn began to spread this rather strange look, and it wasn't long until the ideas of bright colors, zany patterns, and bizarre shapes started to permeate into many areas of society, leading to that now famous look and feel of the 1980s. Naturally, one can see how this wild use of color and shape, which almost broke away from what can be seen as more grounded and practical styles of the previous decades, influenced many areas of fashion and seemingly architecture, even if it was just new paint, helped inspire or at least add to places such as Miami. So if you think about it, it's almost like a pyramid, with Memphis and Miami towards the bottom, which inspired TV shows and movies, which inspired video games and more recent forms of media, which finally were the basis for the creation of these Miamified, outrun, synthesized, and vaporized camouflage patterns, which finally brings us back to them. Since their inception, a number of companies have offered a variety of patterns, each of which put a little unique twist on them, being seen on items ranging from actual uniforms and tactical gear to casual wear like button-up shirts, polos, and shorts. But anyway, that was a fun little jaunt back in time, but let's now hop away from Miami and the 80s to one final and vastly different take on camouflage, a pattern related to YouTube and an actual person. If you've watched videos on this channel, chances are good you've either watched or at least heard of Forgotten Weapons. Beginning in 2011, the channel originally started as a small website making basic posts surrounding more obscure firearms with the occasional video. As interest grew, so too did the videos in both detail and frequency until it became the primary focus. Hosted by Ian McCullum, most videos will lay out a specific gun talking about its history, design, significance, and many other elements, often with sprinklings of humor and personality that Ian uniquely brings. Due to this, and the topic as a whole, a dedicated fan base around the channel, and even Ian, quickly spawned a community which on places such as Reddit posts and discusses anything and everything related to firearms and forgotten weapons. This has over the years led to quite a few joke posts and even Ian-related memes, with perhaps one of the most famous taking Ian's love of Cosmoline and mixing it with an already established meme known as Feels Good. This meme, classified as an outline exploitable style, took a stock photo of a man holding both hands up to his face, and since then has mostly been used as a way to express positivity, feeling good, or enjoying something immensely. Since then, it's spread out and been remixed to showcase various people and characters, with one appearance showing a Soviet soldier smearing cosmoline over his face, a play on the Soviet Union's excessive use of the anti-rusting material when storing older firearms such as Mosin Nagants. Naturally, it wouldn't be long until this meme and variant would be remixed, seeing Ian in the pose with the background featuring a variety of firearms. From there, the image itself was taken and around 2016 made into a humorous camouflage composed only of that image overlapped, turned in various angles, and recolored. Names for it would vary from IFT, short for Ian Fan Tree, Disruptive Ian Material, Ian Camo, and most popularly and now somewhat officially IanPat, short for Ian Pattern. Early on, there appeared to be two variants, a temperate one utilizing light greens and tans, as well as an arid one seeing more tans and browns. At some point later on, a third variant would see the colors turn darker, evoking more of a woodland scheme. For the first few years, these remained just an online joke appearing here and there in forums, posts, and so on, with the occasional community mod for a game appearing too. However, the first major and seemingly official usage of it came in 2019 when the third variant of the pattern was turned into a promotional skin for tanks in the online game War Thunder as a tie-in with Forgotten Weapons, as it was officially announced by Ian himself on the website. Over the next few years, it would pop up here and there, but never in any major way. That would change though in April of 2024. As a part of an April Fool's Day promotion, the Finnish company Varustuleka, which had sold a handful of official Forgotten Weapons related products such as reference in historical books to hats, shirts, and Albonia patches, and even at one point Cosmoline bearing a recreation of that Ian meme, announced they had taken a variant of the design and developed it into a three-piece uniform consisting of a boonie hat, jacket, and pair of pants, which would become available in limited quantities through their website. Being worked on for 2 years, Ian had tracked down the original creator of the design and gotten their approval for the endeavor. From there, the pattern was adjusted slightly as far as scaling and color scheme to emulate more of a transitional woodland one, while also becoming near-infrared compliant. It was then applied to a boonie, which was modeled off the officially issued one of the Finnish Defense Forces, along with the L4 field jacket and pants of Varustuleka's in-house brand Sarma TST. This L4, or level 4, is the fieldwear level, which itself is a part of a 7-level clothing system which sees varying garments for all types of weather, temperatures, and climates. So all in all, the pattern, which itself had been a meme and online joke for many years, turned into a fully fledged, ready-to-go uniform boasting a plethora of features and user accessibility. But how effective is the pattern at concealing wearers? Well, apart from its NIR compliance, from the perspective of the naked eye, it's pretty decent, as showcased in one of YouTuber Brent0331's camouflage effectiveness videos. Though the limited run of these uniforms is long finished, when asked, Varustuleka stated that future projects or items related to IanPat or other meme or joke camouflages aren't out of the realm of possibility, though nothing is currently in the works. But being as the company likes to have a bit of fun, only time will really tell. But this looks to be a good point to start wrapping things up. Most of the aforementioned items are still readily available through a variety of outlets and sources, though the IanPat pieces were made in limited quantities, so you may have to search around a bit for those. A special thanks to Varustuleka for providing some additional information about IanPat, and if you have ideas for items that could fall into this sort of joke meme classification, be sure to leave them in the comments below, as there are quite a few other pieces and looks that can be talked about in another video. Until then though, be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't yet done so. If not, no problem. Just make sure to check back real soon for more videos right here on Uniform History.